Good morning, Yidin. We are on Kuf Yud Ches Amud Aleph, Kuf Yud Ches Amud Aleph, the 118a. Turn the page over, or turn the page actually. Kuf Yud Ches Amud Aleph, 118a. Kuf Yud Ches Amud Aleph. You got to turn the page, yeah. Okay, so if you go to the wider set of lines and you count down 1, 2, 3 lines, there's a little aleph, and it says Amar Rav Chizda. Okay, so where are we in the Gemara? The Gemara told us that the night of the Seder, in addition to the complete Hallel, which is divided in half, the first part, the first two paragraphs, the first two chapters are of Tehillim, that's the section of Hallel. We read before we drink the second cup of wine at the end of Magid, and the rest of Hallel we read after the third cup, before the fourth cup. Yeah, that's Hallel after benching, yes? Said the Gemara, or the Mishnah, and the Gemara. Amar Rav Chizda, where you see third of the wider set of lines. Middle. Yeah. So the Gemara told us, the Mishnah told us that in addition to the Hallel, we are to recite what's called the Hallel HaGadol, the Great Hallel. In addition to the regular Hallel, we're to read the Great Hallel. What is the Great Hallel? The Gemara had a number of opinions, and we learn that the Great Hallel is the 26 lines of Ki Le'olam Chazdai. Chapter 136, is it in Tehillim? What chapter was it in Tehillim? 136? Yeah, 136. And there's one, it's Kuf Lamed Vav 136, and there's 26 lines which conclude with Ki Le'olam Chazdai. Why is it considered the Hallel HaGadol? Why is it called the Great Hallel? So we explained, because it speaks in this Hallel, in this Great Hallel, it speaks of how Hashem provides sustenance for everyone. He gives bread to all flesh. So, because so because it speaks of Hashem providing parnasa, sustenance, therefore it gets the designation of the Great Hallel. Right. And we explained last time the Hasidic interpretation and understanding of how Gedula, grandeur, gets to Parnasa, right? Because Gedula is Chesed. Yeah, we explained that. Okay. Now, the Gemara is actually going to... Okay, and we explained that the Gedula, the grandeur here is specifically the fact that Hashem provides unwarranted, right? The 26 generations from the creation of the world until the giving of the Torah, where Hashem provides for the universe freely, right? There's no the prophets on the what's the word now? The prophets on the return haven't started yet, because that only starts with Torah. 26 generations of just free giving. That's the reference here in Ki Le'olam Chazdai. Yes, remember this? Okay. Now the Gemara is going to give a kind of inverse way of thinking about this, in a very interesting sort of way of understanding what chesed is, what the kindness here is of Ki Le'olam Chazdai, what the gedula is. So let's see. Amar Rav Chizda says, "My diksiv." What's the meaning of the verse which reads, "Hoidul Hashem ki tov." Praise be to God, for He is good. That's the first of the 26 Ki Le'olam Chazdais. Hoidul Hashem ki tov. Praise be to God that He's good. Okay, so what is the meaning of that? Seems pretty simple, right? No, let's see what the Gemara has. Says Rav Chizda, Hoidul Hashem, praise be to God, shegoiva chayvasa shel adam, He collects man's debts, b'toy vasai, in His goodness. The praise here is not only that Hashem provides freely. That was one angle. The other angle here is actually Hashem's kindness and how He takes from you. He takes from you. So if, God forbid, a person must lose because of misdeeds or whatnot, because of failings in life, and Hashem has to punish, to use the classic language, so He takes in His goodness. How's that? Asher b'shaydai, He takes the ox from the rich man, Ves ani, and the poor person b'si, from his sheep, Yosam, the orphan, b'beit sasai, from his egg, Almana, the widow, b'tarnagalaisa, from her chicken. Meaning, Hashem, in other words, two people who owe the same because they have the same sin, let's say, but Hashem will collect that debt from each person based on what they can afford. It's a progressive tax, not a flat tax, to use common political parlance. Yeah. Yes. 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 A variable sin offering that's on scale. Yes, correct. Yeah.
In the Gemara also that states that if a man is wealthy, God made him wealthy.
Yep.
And then the guy just dropped God. When second, then he lost all his wealth.
Yeah, so that's the point here. When Hashem takes, he takes based on the person's ability. Now, this based on his that's right. So that's the kindness the Gemara describes here. So there's a number of ways, there's levels to this understanding this. Let's look at it from this way. Why is it such a major kindness? How else would you do it? How else would you do it? And why would you think it would be differently? Why would you think Hashem would do it differently? There's a great kindness here that Hashem is taking it on a scale rather than flat. Why would you think it's flat?
Fairness.
Okay, so what
sin is equal to a payment.
Exactly. So on a fairness, or in other words, there's a cost for everything. We're not going to scale. I'm not charging you less for something because you happen to not be able to afford it. They don't charge me less on glasses because I can't afford it. The glasses cost a certain amount. We pay a certain amount. That's it.
Yeah. Adjudicate a case in Torah. They don't give favoritism to the wealthy person.
Not allowed to. Not allowed to. It's by law you're not allowed to if you're a court of law, right?
Or a poor person for that matter.
So why exactly? That's right. The Torah has an explicit prohibition. That's what you're mentioning. There's an explicit prohibition for a judge who will show favoritism to either someone who's poor because he feels bad for the guy, or favoritism to someone who's rich because you want to get him those good graces. Right? In fact, the virtue of a judge, as you know, the Rebbe speaks about this quite a bit, and look at the how a good judge is a kind of judge who it makes no difference whether the case in front of him is a penny, or okay, a penny's not a shava pruta, a dime, and $1 million. The law is the same. The law is the same, and as far as he's concerned, he lives in the world of the law, and the law is the same. So if the case comes in before him and someone stole $1, someone stole $1 million, the same rationale, the same pilpul, the same understanding, the same insight to the law.
The Gemara is asking the question, where does Hashem's kindness come from?
This is Hashem's kindness. That Hashem doesn't do that.
Oh, that's just
This is a statement. I'm giving the backstory to that statement. Suggesting what perhaps is the backstory to that statement. Right? Let's understand deeper. So why is that? Why is it that the law does not take into consideration the person's means? Right, justice is blind. Right, what's the lady justice? She's blind. It's a U.S. thing, it's not a Canadian thing, right? But the lady justice is blind, right? That's the point. Holding the scale makes a difference. The law is blind. Why is that? It gets even deeper than just because, well, you know, one is you can't function like that, where you have like a law that's based on the judge's feelings towards how, you know, you have some sociopath come into court and play some game and makes a pity case, and you start showing favoritism. You can't do that, right? But even deeper than that, what's really happening here is, because if truth is truth, then it's unbending and unyielding to your circumstance. Truth is truth. If truth is truth, then it doesn't matter what you think or what you feel. Facts don't care about your feelings, right? That's the meaning. If truth is truth, then truth is truth. What's the difference if the truth is that this sin is worth X, then that's what Hashem should take from you. Doesn't make a difference what your circumstances are. So what's Hashem's kindness? The kindness here is, of course, the truth is truth. That remains true. And there's also a truth about what Hashem knows about your situation. And that's the kindness here. That it's almost like Hashem's empathy to the particularities of your situation, notwithstanding the fact that there's absolute truths. And if we only
the parties here,
yeah,
the parties here, in that case, it's between you and Hashem, whereas in the courtroom, it's between you and another person.
In the court, the judge can only judge by what he sees, and he cannot see beyond what the law says. So he has to stick to the law blind, and that's it. But Hashem, who can see, Hashem, who's the ultimate judge, who can see deep into the person, who he is and what he is and what's going on, he can adjudicate based on your circumstance. And therefore, the way in which Hashem judges one person, not the same way Hashem judges another. Right? So, like we spoke about this before, since this Elul it's actually connected, right? When it comes to like Rosh Hashanah and davening, we speak a lot about how Hashem knows all of our thoughts. Hashem knowing all of our thoughts. Does that scare you? For many, it does. Oh my gosh, there's so many hideous thoughts in my head, and Hashem should know them. You know, if you found out someone else knew your thoughts, it would be very scary. If you found out someone else knows my thoughts, yeah. Okay. That's true on one level. That's a very surface level of thoughts. Hashem knows all your hideous thoughts. And he also knows that deep down you're struggling with them. He also knows where they came from. He also knows why they come to you. So Hashem's knowing your situation doesn't stop at the surface level of hideous thoughts. It goes all the way down to the depth of what you're dealing with on a much deeper level than just it's an intimate knowing. That's right. So that there's the kindness that even in his quote punishing from you, it's not punishing with folded arms. Truth is truth, and I'm giving out my punishment. Because what can I tell you? What can I do? The law is blind. No, there's an incredible kindness here that Hashem is, even his punishment takes into consideration who you are.
That's for you. You're supposed to be a judge who is sort of just going by.
Exactly.
Try to come to the best outcome, but not necessarily the best for you.
Exactly. So, which we mean then perhaps that the Gemara says here that Hashem takes from the rich and the poor and so on. It's not just a question of physical wealth, but also their spiritual wealth. Who are they and what's going on in their lives? Right? Like he says here, Hashem takes from the widow and the orphan. You can have a wealthy widow. But if she's a widow, then she deserves a little more compassion. You know, she happens to be wealthy. Right? So, I don't love getting political, but this is just to make this point. Right? There's this statement I mentioned before. It's used often, to make this point that truth is truth and doesn't bend is facts don't care about your feelings, right? This is a famous line. It's true, facts don't care about feelings, but there are also facts about feelings. Those are also facts. There are facts about the way people feel, and there's facts about the way people experience life. And Hashem, in his kindness, take that into consideration, and not just the objective facts. Oh, you sinned, this was because, and we're taking it from you. But this is an incredible kindness, and Hashem's empathy in his judgment. Even in punishment, there is the empathy of Hashem. It's a very beautiful thing, especially during Elul. Right? This is similar to the Medrash, which says that Hashem first created the world with it's quoted in Tanya. Hashem first created the world with justice, I think it is, and then Hashem saw that the world cannot handle it, cannot survive. So So he what's the word? He added to it. Yes. Hashem created the world through the attribute of judgment or justice, din. He saw however the world cannot endure. He combined with it the attribute of mercy. So not that there's no more judgment. It doesn't say Hashem therefore replaced the system and said, okay, no judgment, we're going to bring in compassion instead to create the world. But that he embedded within judgment compassion. And even in his judgment, even in his taking punishment, there's a compassion component. Right? So it's not, which is a deeper kindness. The kindness spoken of before, the 26th generation before Torah came, there's no judgment. It's just plain old kindness. Hashem just gives. Right? There's no judgment there because there's no moral standard yet. Torah isn't given yet. So Hashem's giving freely for 26 generations. That's the point of the Gemara we learned on Tuesday. Right? But now the Gemara is saying, no. There is a judgment. There is a standard. So it's post-Torah. But in there too, there's a compassion. So there is a judgment. The judgment is compassionate. It's not chesed, right? It's rachamim. Chesed, kindness is just give. No compassion. No. There's no need for compassion because there's no reason. There's no judgment. There's no standard. Just give. 26 generations. Hashem give. They deserve. Don't deserve. Torah. No Torah. Give. But now we're post Torah, so there is a judgment. There is a standard, moral standard, and yet there's the judgment too is also compassionate, based on what the person's circumstance is.
So
that's not in every case.
Sorry.
That's not in every case.
What do you mean?
This compassion from Hashem. It's not like Hashem gives there's compassion. Hashem's judgment always, but on this case that we're talking about of of Hashem judging, punishing up to what you could afford, let's say.
Yeah.
That's not in every case. It's like that.
I don't know. The Gemara doesn't even qualify. What do you mean? Why do you mean it's not like that?
There's certain things that are black and white. You do the crime.
In the court of law.
But in Torah as well.
Right, in the Torah court of law. I mean, in Bezdin.
Yeah.
In Torah is Bezdin because, again, the judge can only judge based on what he sees.
Yeah.
And the judge cannot know what's going on inside your heart. So he follows a standard of truth in Torah, and that's the end of the story. Right? Hashem doesn't have to abide by that. Because what's the pasuk that Adam yirle nayim, man sees with the eyes, Hashem yirle levav, Hashem sees in the heart. Hashem knows what's really going on. Right? So he can be compassionate in his judgment. Unlike a human judge that cannot do that. Not allowed to. It's against law to be compassionate in your judgment. Even in a Torah judge. Because a Torah judge cannot see beyond what the facts show. Right?
Some punishments in Torah, they can't be adjudicated in the Bezdin, adjudicated by heaven.
Many of judges. Yes, correct.
It says, we'll die by the hands of heaven.
That's correct.
Hands of heaven.
Yep. That's correct.
But when was this? I'm sorry. When was this infused? This hybrid of action after Torah was given?
It's a good question. The way that the quote I mentioned earlier from the Medrash, the Tanya there quotes, that speaks about at the beginning of creation. Here it doesn't say when. Here it just says that Hashem's kindness is he judges based on the person's circumstance or based on the person's affordability. It doesn't say when that started. I'm suggesting, based on the flow of the Gemara, the previous statement was explicitly about the 26 iterations before Torah was given, which is free giving, right? And the next statement doesn't qualify when it is, but it does talk about a judgment and when a person owes. That only starts when there's a moral standard that comes from Torah. After 26 generations, when there is a moral judgment and there is a moral standard, but that moral standard is even if I judge compassionately. By the way, when it comes to humans, there also is such an expectation. The Pirkei Avos says that you're supposed to judge every person favorably. Or don't judge anybody till you come to their shoes, till you come to their place, right? So it's not as the modern, pop culture would say, don't judge anybody. Medrash doesn't say don't judge. I'm sorry, the Pirkei Avos doesn't say don't judge. It says judge favorably. That's very different than not judging. Because not judging implies there's no moral standard. Don't judge. Do whatever you want.
Judge favorably, but don't judge disproportionately, favoring one side over the other.
Well, here, one second. So, which means there is a judgment, there is a moral standard.
It's compassionate,
but we're judging favorably in the sense that if considering your circumstance, don't judge someone until you come to his place. So go to his place, as Tanya says in chapter 30. Go to his place. Think about what his life is like. Where does he come from? Where did he grow up? What did he do all day? Right, and then you'll understand why he did what he did. I'm not judging. Am I not judging it? Of course I'm judging it. It's an immoral act. That was incorrect. The modern don't judge me, don't judge anybody, is another way of saying we have no moral standard. Because don't judge. This person wants to do X, this person wants to do X, don't judge. As long as they're not hurting anybody else, live and let live. Right? But that is a veiled way of saying we have no moral standard. And Torah absolutely has a moral standard. There's an absolute judgment. But do so favorably. In the sense that I'm compassionate and understand where he came from, why he did what he did. He comes from this and this circumstance. Don't judge someone until he comes to this place. It means there is a judgment, but it comes from his place. It comes from where he is. How does he live his life? What kind of life? Where does he come from? What does he know? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
It can be applied legal system today, where when the trial is happening, the more fact-driven scenario takes place. But let's say the person becomes convicted of the crime. Then the judge has the leeway to impart all of the background of the individual to see
And the
how
sentencing.
to sentence.
Okay.
Taking all that information.
Good point. So two things. Number one, this Mishnah quoted that says that don't judge someone until you come to this place. It's not talking about a judge in a court. It's talking about you and I who sit around looking at other people, right? So we have a moral standard and we see someone misbehaving. We're not going to whitewash and say, oh, it's not moral. It's not immoral because, hey, live and live. No, it's immoral. But we'll look at that immorality and say, okay, let's understand why he got the way he is. Right, so I'm judging that immorality, absolutely, but favorably, right? Number one. Number two, to your point about a judge and sentencing. So in Torah, the judge doesn't have leeway in sentencing. In the legal court, the judge is given a window of how much they can sentence, and that That's right. But and then they can decide they want to go the max or the minimum, right? In Torah law doesn't exist. There's an absolute judgment and it's given. At the same time, in the judgment and in the execution of a verdict, there's compassion. In halacha, for example, the entire Sanhedrin, or at least a big chunk of it, talks about capital punishment. And in there, when it describes the system of capital punishment, it keeps on talking about how you have to do it in such a way where it's painless. Choose for him a clean or good death. Right? The Gemara explains why. Why do we have to give him a good clean death? He's a sinner. He's a murderer. But let's just say, right? And he actually made it to the point of capital punishment. You know how difficult it is to get capital punishment in the Torah? You have to have two witnesses who were there and warned the guy and told him if you do X, you're going to get capital punishment. He says, now I don't care and does it anyway.
Sanhedrin has to have two. You can't win by one vote alone.
And it's majority vote, not by one vote alone, right? After all of this, which means he's an absolute convicted by all standards murderer, and yet you have to choose for him a good death. Make sure it's painless, make sure it's dignified. Why? Says the Gemara, because you have to love your fellow as you love yourself. So even a convicted murderer is someone that you are supposed to have a compassionate love for, and therefore, even as you're sentencing him, do so in a manner that's going to be compassionate. Where you show love and you're killing him. Okay, so I can't change the verdict as Hashem can. Can't do that. There's an absolute standard of Torah, but still, at least in my feeling, as much as I can, there's the compassion, even for this convicted murderer, who is now going to be hung by the gallows.
Is that a parallel?
It's making a parallel to this idea, yeah.
Okay.
We cannot alter the judgments of Torah. We cannot do that. But where we can, the Gemara instructs that we are to introduce dignity and compassion for the convicted murderer.
That's parallel to Hashem's compassion on
according to each person, based on what he knows they can afford, what they can do.
Escalates. In Jewish law, sometimes if there's one witness, the witness is accusing somebody in law, and
it's more like a leap.
Could be stoned instead of the other guy.
If he was found to be lying.
false witness, yeah.
If you have, yes. In a certain circumstance of false witnesses. It's a certain kind of false witness. Not every kind of false witness has that. Okay.
Yeah, but it has to be proven, right, that they were somewhere else at the time of the murder or the crime was committed.
Yes, yeah.
But then they get the punishment.
And then they get the punishment.
They get the punishment of
what they tried to correct. Well, see such a so. Yeah. Very good. Okay, so we'll stop over here, and God willing, today's Friday. So Monday, we're going to go to the next section of the Gemara. We're going to talk about how quote unquote difficult it is to provide parnasa for everybody. Yeah. For Hashem, as it were. We'll try to explain what that means. If something's difficult for Hashem, we'll try to explain what that means. But God willing, the Gemara is going to go through a bunch of different statements describing how difficult it is to provide for parnasa for everybody. Okay, wonderful day, everybody. A good Ner Shabbos. You're having a good time. It goes fast. 9 o'clock.
Saturday afternoon is really good instead of sleeping. 4 hours will go by fast.
Have a good day, Eden. Good Ner Shabbos.